I spent almost 11 years in isolation units, solitary confinement, maximum security conditions, in the hardest places for women.
Susan Lisa Rosenberg has been in prison for 16 years and may yet serve another 20 for a murder she was never tried for. If the government gets its way, she will not be paroled.
When you are defined as a cop killer, there's nothing more that you can do.
I'm Mike Wallace.
I'm Morley Safer.
I'm Ed Bradley.
I'm Steve Croft.
I'm Leslie Stahl. Those stories and Andy Rooney tonight on 60 Minutes.
Her name is Susan Lisa Rosenberg. For the past 16 years, she's been in prison. If the government has its way, she could spend another 20 behind bars for a crime she says she did not commit and knew nothing of. A crime she's never even been tried for, the murder of a security guard and 2 police officers in 1981 during the botched robbery of a Brinks armored truck in the Nanuet shopping mall near the village of Nyack, New York. The Brinks murders were a stunning blow to a tiny community that lost 2 of its most popular police officers. Every year on the anniversary, October 20th, the village of Nyack holds a ceremony of remembrance. The robbery was the last violent gasp of left-wing radicalism and one of the most notorious crimes of that era. Not your typical heist, but a political crime executed by a group of black militants who used radical white women like Susan Rosenberg as cover. She's 45 years old now and has been in prison for 16 years. A leftover, it seems, of another America.
October 20th, 1981.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The Brinks robbery in the shopping mall in Nanuet. People you know are involved in it, correct?
Yes. Yes.
What was your reaction to this?
Horror. Horror. I was very upset.
Horrified enough to say, look, without me, I'm getting out of this group. This is really bad stuff. They're killing people out there.
No, not right then. Subsequently, I would say that, but not right then. I wish I had.
Rosenberg was working as a clinician in a Harlem health clinic alongside at least 2 of the men involved in Brinks. The clinic did actually treat people, but the government maintains it was also a gathering place for a group of revolutionaries and a staging ground for a string of violent crimes.
How could you not have known what was going on?
Well, I didn't. I didn't know what was going on. That wasn't my role. You know, if anyone had sort of self-defined roles. I really was a political person, and don't get me wrong. I think that there is a fine line between supporting something publicly, politically, and what then the effect of that is. I supported the right of oppressed people to armed struggle, yes, I did. That didn't mean I did it.
4 people were arrested in Nyack on the day of the Brinks crime. A manhunt was launched for the others, and the FBI rounded up dozens of people who were associated with the Harlem Clinic. Rosenberg was not among them, but almost a year later, without ever having been questioned, she was indicted as a conspirator.
And what did you do?
I didn't turn myself in.
You ran.
I ran. I fled. I didn't trust the government. I already had great cause not to. I think I was really afraid. And I believe now that that was the fatal mistake of my life.
How did this child of privilege, daughter of a New York dentist, privately educated, an early life that was an American tapestry, find the way to what is effectively a life sentence.
Your voice teacher said, Susan, you got to choose art or politics.
She said, if you go to one more demonstration and you scream and lose your voice, you will never sing another note.
Is that a regret?
Yes, it's a great regret. Sure, yes.
She was a child of the 60s. With her parents' blessing, she was marching in civil rights demonstrations at age 7. At 11, she was protesting the Vietnam War. By her early 20s, she was a fully committed revolutionary.
It was a choice, you know. Life is complicated, and people are really complicated, and I'm really complicated, and I know that, and I know that it's hard to put yourself in my shoes. Why would you want to?
John Castellucci, author of The Big Dance, an account of the Brinks case, says Rosenberg, the revolutionary, stood out.
She seems to be really one of the most fervent and almost rabid members of the group when it comes to the question of whether violence should be used in the furtherance of revolutionary goals.
So she was a totally committed revolutionary.
In words. However, when push came to shove and she had to act, she went to pieces.
After the Brinks indictment, she was on the run for 2 years, considered armed and dangerous by the FBI, part of a diminishing remnant of the radical underground.
We're caught, but we're not defeated.
She was caught in 1984, along with an accomplice and an arsenal of explosives and weapons in New Jersey. They were handed the longest sentence in U.S. history for possession of weapons, 58 years behind bars.
Long live the armed struggle.
On top of that, she was faced with the Brinks allegations. She maintained her innocence of any involvement and demanded to be tried. The government refused and dropped the Brinks charges, saying it was satisfied with that tough 58-year weapons sentence.
You understand why. To a lot of people watching, would say what the government said. We're not going to do better than 58 more years, so.
This case ruined my life. I was labeled and defined by this case. And when they could really just have taken me to trial, they opted not to. And I think that they opted not to because they had a bad case.
You wanted a trial.
At that point, I did. I had fled, and I had ruined my parents' life. I'd ruined a lot of people's lives. And I had this heavy charge. And I wanted to
Accessory to murder
deal.
of police officers.
Yes, I wanted to challenge that because I didn't do that.
In 1998, she applied for parole and had a stack of support. The prison psychologist who said she was the most outstanding inmate he'd ever dealt with. Her achievement of a master's degree. The curriculum she wrote and the Bureau of Prisons now uses in counseling female inmates. The Bureau of Prisons report that she was fully rehabilitated and posed no threat to society. She had reason to be optimistic. But before her hearing, the federal prosecutor raised a red flag with this letter to the Parole Commission, arguing against her release. It says her crimes were too enormous to overlook, that she was intimately involved in Brinks, and it points to evidence of her fingerprints in a Brinks getaway car that crashed after a police chase.
Everyone in the car fleeing from the scene was arrested. She wasn't in the getaway car. The getaway car belonged to a friend, not implicated in the case. What were her fingerprints found on? A map, an owner's manual in the glove compartment?
Such evidence, says her lawyer, Mary O'Melveny, is pure distortion. The government's claim, for instance, that Rosenberg's fingerprints were found in the gang's hideouts, including one that was used as a refuge after Brinks.
The FBI analyzed thousands and thousands of fingerprints in the safe houses, and they found no fingerprints of Susan Rosenberg. What did they find fingerprints on? Political leaflets. Political leaflets that get handed around. Everybody acknowledges that she was a political activist.
The case against Rosenberg, her indictment, was based on the accounts of 2 gang members the government had made deals with. The testimony of one against other suspects simply crumbled in court. He was the one who placed Rosenberg behind the wheel of a second getaway car.
and FBI fingerprint analysis showed no fingerprints in that car. But does the Parole Commission have any opportunity to really assess that? Does Susan Rosenberg have any opportunity before the Parole Commission to contest that? No.
I sat in front of the Parole Commission, or the parole examiner, and he said to me, he said, well, you know, Miss Rosenberg, you're 11 years clear conduct. You're clearly a different person than you were. I have no doubt about that. I have two choices. I can either recommend immediate parole, or I can take this case, the Brinks robbery, into account and hold you responsible for 3 murders. And there was no question about it. You know, so I'm now in prison, I feel, for an indictment.
On the face of it, the government is keeping her in prison by using that 18-year-old indictment to maintain the appearance of her involvement in Brinks. The federal government will not argue its case against her in court, nor will it answer reporters' questions about the Rosenberg case. It merely accuses.
It is extraordinary for the Parole Commission to say untested, unproven allegations will make us keep you in jail for 15 more years.
That have nothing to do with the reason she's in jail.
Nothing at all. We looked at every case we could find to see if the Parole Commission had ever done anything like this before, and they never have.
When you are defined as a cop killer, there's nothing more that you can do. If it's in your label, what's called your prison jacket, how you are defined, that's going to be how you're treated. I spent almost 11 years in isolation units, solitary confinement, maximum security conditions, in the hardest places for women. But it was kind of expected because I understood what my jacket was. And, you know, when I didn't get parole, I was very upset, but I wasn't shocked because I understood and have from the beginning that that's the government's view of me. Wrong, but their view.
Last year, Rosenberg argued in U.S. District Court that the Justice Department had kept her in prison illegally by raising the Brinks indictment with the Parole Commission 10 years after the charges had been dropped. The court found the government's actions to be troublesome, but said it was still legal to keep Rosenberg in prison for at least 15 more years on the basis of the untried conspiracy allegations.
I've done everything I know in my heart on every level to take responsibility for what I think I have to. I'm not going to take responsibility for something that the government thinks that I should because they think I should, and I didn't do it. I'm not going to do that. But to the degree that I feel like I've made big, huge mistakes, yeah, I don't know what else I could do. I don't know what else I could do. Yeah, sure. I would love to go home.
To that end, Ms. Rosenberg has filed a petition for clemency with the White House. It is traditional to consider such petitions in the last few weeks of a president's term.